Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're getting into cybersecurity fundamentals, think of this explainer as your secret weapon. Seriously, this is like a masterclass designed to help you completely ace those exams. We're about to break down all the core concepts you absolutely have to know.
But before we dive in, let's start with a question. Just imagine for a second, what if every single secret you've ever sent online, every password, every private DM, wasn't tucked away in a sealed envelope, but just written on a public postcard for anyone to read along the way? That's a terrifying thought, right? But here's the thing. That postcard scenario is exactly what's happening when you use unencrypted public Wi-Fi. Your data is just out there, totally in the open. Now, that sealed letter you see on the right, that's encryption. And it's pretty much our first and most important line of defense to make sure our secrets, stay secret.
Exactly. So for the rest of this explainer, we're going to take you on a tour of what we're calling the digital kingdom. First, we're going to dig into why we even need defenses in the first place. Then we'll get into the fundamental rules of protection. After that, we'll face the hard truth about the defender's, almost impossible job. And finally, we'll look at the compromises that security always demands. Think of this as your roadmap.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. Why we need defenses. Look, before we can even think about building the walls of our digital kingdom, we first have to understand why it's at risk. What are the fundamental dangers we're up against?
So, here's the crucial thing to understand. The risk really boils down to two main ideas. These are the two things that make modern computing so incredibly powerful, but also so vulnerable. And they are resource sharing and dependence. Just think of it like we're all living in a big, bustling digital village.
And this slide here just illustrates that problem perfectly. So on the left, you've got the commons. In our little digital village, we're all sharing resources, things like cloud servers. It's kind of like a communal well. It's super efficient, but if just one person poisons that well, let's say one virtual machine gets hacked, it can affect absolutely everyone sharing that same resource.
Right.
And that same idea applies to the image on the right, the baker's flour, which is all about dependence. The whole village loves the baker's bread, right? But he is completely dependent on the farmer for his flour. So if the farmer's supply gets compromised for some reason, the baker can't work and the entire village suffers. In the tech world, your super secure website is still vulnerable if it depends on some insecure little third-party plugin. Your system is only ever as strong as its weakest link.
Okay, so we know our digital village is at risk because we all share things and we all depend on each other. That brings us to Section 2. The rules of protection. Now that we get the risks, it's time to learn the actual rules for defending our kingdom.
The first rule of defense is to know your enemy. The threats, or let's call them marauders, at our gates can be broken down into three main groups. First, you've got the highway robber. This is a threat to your data while it's in transit, like someone snooping on your Wi-Fi at a coffee shop. Second, there's the disguised spy, which is basically malware on your own device, a Trojan horse you accidentally let inside the gates. And third, the corrupt innkeeper. This represents a server-side breach, where the service you trust gets hacked from the inside.
So now that we know the threats, what exactly is it that we're trying to protect? Well, the answer is something security pros called the CIA Triad. And let me tell you, for your exams, this is non-negotiable. You have to know this. The easiest way to think of it is as the three crown jewels of our entire digital kingdom. And this slide makes it super easy to remember. The first crown jewel is confidentiality, which we're calling the secret scroll. It just means keeping our data secret, so it's only accessible to authorized people. The second is integrity, the king's ledger. This is all about making sure our data is accurate and can't be messed with. Preventing someone from changing a payment of $100 to $1,000. And finally, there's availability, the castle bridge. This just means making sure that authorized users can actually get to the systems and data when they need.
Okay, seriously, pause and screenshot this slide if you need to. This table sums it all up perfectly. Confidentiality answers the question, who can see it? Integrity answers, can it be trusted? And availability answers, can I get to it when I need to? These three goals, CIA, they're the entire point of our defense.
Okay, so if the CIA Triad is what we're protecting, our next big framework, the AAA model, is all about how we control who gets anywhere near it. Just think of it as the Castle Sentry's checklist. It's the three-step process that every single guard or every system has to follow.
And what's so powerful about this is just how simple the questions are. First, authentication asks, who are you? This is where you prove you are who you say you are, maybe with a password or a fingerprint. Once you're in, authorization asks, okay, what can you do? This part determines your permissions.
Maybe you can only read files, or maybe you're an admin who can do anything. And finally, accounting asks, what did you do? This is the logbook, the record that tracks every action, which is absolutely critical for security monitoring.
Okay, so let's try to put all of this together in what's called the attack chain. You can think of it as the anatomy of a heist. It's a sequence. It always happens in this order. First, there's a threat, a potential danger, like a thief who wants the gold. That threat then looks for a vulnerability, a weakness, like a loose brick in the wall of the vault. The attack is the actual action of exploiting that weakness, and if the attack is successful, it becomes an incident, a security breach. The gold is gone.
Which, unfortunately, brings us to a really tough reality. Section 3, the defender's impossible job. And it's not an exaggeration. Protecting a system is fundamentally, mathematically, harder than attacking one. Let's take a look at why that is.
This slide really says it all. This is the defender's dilemma. It's the core asymmetry of cybersecurity. The attacker, they only need to find one way in. One forgotten window, one weak password, one single tiny flaw to succeed. But the defender, they have to protect every single possible entry point, all the time, without fail. The attacker always has the advantage.
Now, because of that dilemma, some people think the best way to defend something is just to hide how it works, a flawed idea called security by obscurity. But here's the thing, secrets always get out. The correct approach is something called Kirchhoff's principle, which you see right here. A system should be secure even if everyone knows exactly how it works. The only thing that has to stay secret is the key. It's like a high-quality bank vault. Everyone can study the blueprints for the lock, but it doesn't matter one bit if they don't have your unique key. So, how do we actually build real security? Well, it rests on these 3 pillars. First, you need a policy. That's the royal decree that says what's allowed and what isn't. For example, only the HR department can view payroll. Second, you need a mechanism, the actual locks and guards that enforce that policy, like firewalls or passwords. And third, you need assurance. That's testing the walls to make absolutely sure your locks and guards actually work, through things like audits and penetration tests. Policy plus mechanism plus assurance, that equals security. But even with the absolute best policies and the best tools, security is never absolute. And this brings us to our final section, and it's a really critical one for understanding how this works in the real world. Section 4, Security's Necessary Compromises. Security is and always will be a balancing act.
Yeah, we call this the price of a moat. Let's say you want to build a moat around your castle to make it more secure. A wider moat is definitely more secure, but it's going to come with trade-offs. It costs more money for one. It's less convenient, or you could say harder to use for your citizens. It slows down traffic, which hurts performance, and it might limit what you can do, the functionality, or not even be compatible with the drawbridge you already have.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this. The goal is never perfect security, because perfect security would make the system completely unusable, and it would bankrupt the kingdom. The real-world goal is good enough security. A moat that's wide enough to stop most of the threats without bringing everything to a grinding halt. It is all about managing risk. And that brings us right to the summary. Guys, this is your exam cheat sheet. First up, you've got the CIA Triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
That's right, and you cannot forget the AAA model for access control, authentication, authorization, and accounting.
Absolutely crucial. And please, always remember the core asymmetry of defense. The attacker just has to be right once.
Which is why real security needs all 3 pillars working together. That's policy, mechanism, and assurance.
And finally, remember, it's never about being perfect. Real-world security is always a series of trade-offs. So we'll leave you with one final question to think about. Now that you understand the fundamental rules of defense, the threats, the principles, the trade-offs, take a second to think about your own digital life. What is the weakest link in your digital kingdom? We really hope this has been helpful, and thanks for joining us.